Hello and welcome back to this Downfall Idealist Crusade, all Bond fans. This video is going over a number of really cool James Bond books and other book-related items that I picked up to add to my ever-growing literary James Bond bookshelf. But I stumbled across some really, some John Gardner first editions and second and third editions in a local bookshop in the bargain section in just really fantastic shape. So I felt I had to make a video about them, and then in the interim found one or two other really awesome items to add as well. So I'll start with a Fleming edition. This fixes a problem where I've never actually owned a version of 007 in New York in print form. I've read it many times. It's literally the briefest of any Fleming short story. It was originally published in certain editions and certain publications, but wasn't collected until more recently. So it is available in certain collections, like the special Quantum of Solace paperback they did a number of years ago that brought together all the various short stories. But I wasn't able to get a copy of that when it was new. I didn't even realize 007 in New York was in there at first until it was out of print. But thankfully, I picked up the Thomas and Mercer Octopus in the Living Daylights edition. This is in the same black, white, and red motif design that they did for their matching Fleming trade paperbacks, which you can still find. I think they're still somewhat in print. They were primarily sold through Amazon, but they all have this nice matching design, which goes on all the books, and then each cover features a singular image from said story, this giving you something from Octopussy. But these are done in a very no-frills manner. They seem to all feature the UK text. So, for example, on Live and Let Die, that will get you the UK unaltered text as opposed to the US slightly censored and changed text. But what's great about this is this gives you all four of the stories written and published around this time. So it gives you not just Octopus in the Living Daylights, but also Property of a Lady, which was included in the Signet US original 60s paperback and has been included in most later publications of these two stories. But this also adds the all-important 007 in New York, which is located at the end, and of course, as I said, it is literally the briefest Bond story that Fleming ever wrote. Here, it just happens to go onto 7 whole pages, but of course it includes the all-important scrambled eggs recipe for Bond as according to Fleming. So of course this is essential for the Bond gourmands out there, which of course probably already know this by heart, but that's still in here. So that's why I picked up this particular edition when I found it in one of our bookshops. I've just always meant to get 007 in New York in print. I always think that I've got it in print in some version, and then when I go and do my Fleming reread, I lo and behold find that I in fact don't. So this is just fixing that error. So now I finally have a print copy version and one of the Thomas and Mercer black, white, and red modern trade paperbacks. But it's getting really difficult trying to get the John Gardner 80s Bonds in the first editions, or at least original U.S. editions, in good shape. So it's very rare when they pop up and they're not, pretty beat up. And you really don't expect to walk into a bookstore and just see them on a shelf for $1 a piece and, see the perfect color spines. And you're like, wait a minute, what? So this first one, I of course already have a first edition of License Renewed, but this is a really nice condition copy. It's got a very glossy cover, but it's still the same type design that they had for the first 3 novels here in the US, where the Bond silhouette is around the spine, and then when you open up the actual jacket flap, it creates the full silhouette. So it's actually, I think it's really cool looking. But that's how they did it for the first 3 books. So this is just a really great condition copy. This is actually credited as a 4th impression, but this is still, pretty much otherwise identical to a U.S. first edition. And it's also not a book club version, which of course is a lot thinner, but also had the same style jacket that I went over in my Gardner collection video. So this was just too great to pass up, and I bought all these together as a lot essentially. But it's very difficult finding one of these perfect like this because, of course, License Renewed just celebrated its 40th anniversary last year, which is crazy to think. I grew up reading this book along with the Fleming novels, and this is one of Gardner's best books. This is one of the best continuation novels still. So it's really nice to have another really awesome condition copy of the U.S. hardcover. They also had a rather nice copy of the second novel for Special Services. This has the matching art design. I also have a first edition of this. This one I do believe is a first edition. It doesn't credit any printing information on the actual copyright page, but it does seem to be a first edition. Again, also not a book club version because it's not, the thinner dimensions. But this is in rather nice shape. So again, I bought all of them together. Again, that's the first time in many years that I've walked into a bookshop and just seen a whole row of John Gardner first edition hardcovers on the shelf with minty jackets, just because they stick out very much with these bold covers with the bold colors on them. So this was just an incredible surprise, and this, I don't know if I'm going to upgrade my other one, which is pretty clean, but I probably will because this one's in very clean shape. I also have to mention, I find it difficult to choose between the first two Gardner novels. I think the first two are probably his best. So if you've never tried the Gardner books, start at the beginning and read through. I do think the first five are great and solid, and then your mileage may vary with the later ones, but there are some gems, and even in the lesser books, there are always some great set pieces and some interesting Bondian moments that Gardner came up with. But I do really always go back to the first two. I think for Special Services might be the best one overall, but it does get a little outlandish, whereas License Renewed is a bit more grounded here and there. This one I was most excited for. This is a rather clean first edition of Icebreaker, which I only had I have the book club edition, so I was never able to own the actual first edition until now. This carries the same jacket design. Again, they used it on the first three novels before revising it to the other silhouette design we know much more from the other books. So, of course, this is the traditional size compared to the book club edition that I showed in my Gardner video. And this one switches to a photo of Gardner doing research on an actual snowmobile. Icebreaker is a really solid book. It definitely has heavy doses of spycraft. It is very grounded, and it is one of Gardner's better Bond novels. So again, I really say that every fan should try the first five Gardner novels. If you're going to try any of them, I think those are the best and the most well fleshed out and the most Bondian. After that, he started experimenting with different things, and again, your mileage may vary, but I think every Bond fan should at least read the first five Gardner novels once, and Icebreaker is a pretty solid fan favorite among them. This was another one I didn't own in a hardcover version, but this is a book club edition, hence why it's so much smaller. So this is book 4, Roll of Honor, which of course in the UK got Honor with the U, or if you just want to pronounce it that way, I guess. But as far as I know, the texts are the same otherwise. So this is the US cover with the more traditional Gardner era design with the Bond silhouette down here. It's a very bold and bright yellow, so again, you can never mistake these for anything else sitting on the shelf. As I said, seeing as it's a book club edition, the dimensions are a lot smaller. But to be honest, outside of that, they are pretty much the same as the U.S. first editions. So if you don't mind, you can find these for very cheap. But it's even hard to find these in good shape where the cover isn't totally destroyed. But just finally cool to finally have a version of Roll of Honor in hardcover with the U.S. art dust jacket. I will try to eventually find a true first edition, but for now, the book club version in minty shape is a good placeholder. And then last was book 5, which I also was missing in a U.S. first edition. So this is Nobody Lives Forever, which is another, again, I really do still enjoy the first 5 Gardners. I mean, I enjoy things in all of them, don't get me wrong, but I didn't have all of them growing up, so I know I read the first 5 more than a lot of the others because they were among the first Bond novels I was actually able to get in print, because that was when Bond was just completely out of print in the mid 90s, and you couldn't even get the Fleming novels unless you found them in used bookshops. So I read the Gardners, and especially the earlier ones, along with the Fleming novels interchangeably. This has the U.S. standard Gardner art on a very vivid purple background, which doesn't quite make you think Bond, but again, that's pretty much, I think, iconic for the 80s and 90s Gardner novels here in the U.S. This one is a longer book, so it is a rather thick hardcover, but I will say that this is the point, because this switches over to Putnam. These and the rest of the Gardner era hardcovers, it's a definitely a different type of binding. They're a lot thicker in the hand, but also the paper type, the actual stock, is a bit thicker. And as you see, there is a slight bit of browning that happens with this era of Gardner. So I will say that it is something you want to look out for. I've found it pretty much on most of the Gardner books. Basically, it seems like Nobody Lives Forever, they switched up the printing style and maybe the actual paper type they used, and then it isn't until the last 2 or 3 books in the early to mid 90s where they got a little bit better on the paper again. So it is very difficult finding clean, readable, collectible copies of the Gardner books now, because they're getting on up there in age, but also because here in the U.S. They were very well read, but also the paper stock is not necessarily as good on the sort of mid range of the books. So I have noticed that on a lot of them, again, they do start to brown a little bit, but this one is still in pretty nice shape. So again, for the price I paid for it, I'm not complaining. And they also switched to the blue and green that they used on some of the Gardner books, whereas all the previous ones were just plain black bindings. So there you have it, 5 clean, original John Gardner editions of the first 5 John Gardner novels. All but 1 are original U.S. editions, and 3 of them are first editions. So these are some nice upgrade copies for some of my Gardner collection. And again, this is the first time in years that I walked into a bookstore, new or used books, and just saw a whole row of Gardner sitting on the shelf in perfect shape. So the fact that these were all $1, I was not leaving without all of them. Then my local comic shop had an interesting bundle. I don't normally go into the Bond comics as much as I probably should, so I have been playing catch up with a number of those. And of course, Dynamite Comics have been doing a number of Bond runs, so there are a lot of more modern comics for me to catch up on. Now, I do try and I do prefer getting collected trade paperback editions of comics as opposed to individual issues, but those are kind of pricey, and I'd always meant to check out some of the Dynamite books. I just never gotten around to it. And then I just noticed on an end cap where they have just collected runs of comics that hadn't sold, they had an entire run of the James Bond 007 Dynamite run. So these are the 12 issues, and they were all nicely bagged and boarded. So I couldn't resist picking these up to finally start collecting the Dynamite comics. So these also have a number of variant covers. So if you have some of these or you're used to seeing them, you may not recognize some of these covers, which I didn't realize there were, a number of variants on these. And I have to say, on these, they all look quite nice. So this is just me catching up on the Dynamite runs. And they did have 12 of them, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, is the entire run of this particular storyline. So I am definitely playing catch up with Bond comics, which again is probably the one aspect of James Bond in the media landscape that I have admittedly not been as devout in following. So I am making up for lost time. There are, of course, a variety of Dynamite runs. They've done Felix Leiter comics. They've done multiple James Bond runs now. And, of course, before Dynamite, Dark Horse did a number of James Bond comics in the 90s. And of course, before that, there are the primarily the Marvel comics that were done a few times. There's the For Your Eyes Only adaptation. Then License to Kill also got an adaptation. And the one I really want to find is the Dr. No one. But of course, finding a comic from the 60s is a lot harder. So this was just a really cool find. I just stumbled across a whole bundle of the Dynamite James Bond 007 comics. So I can't wait to tear through, well, not tear through them, of course, but I can't wait to dig into these and see what Dynamite has done with this particular run. So then I saved the best for last. This is definitely my best Bond find in a very long time. This is a book I've wanted to get and read for years. It's unfortunately been out of print for a number of years. I don't think it's ever really been reprinted. When I was finally able to find the hardcover edition, this is actually the UK printing, released in 1998. This is Cubby Broccoli's memoir, When the Snow Melts. Again, this is a very uncommon book. I have talked to some fans who have read it before, and the general consensus is this isn't quite as revealing as you would hope it would be. And now that we have a number of really awesome Bond reference works that are unauthorized and get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details, we have that kind of stuff available. But I've always wanted to read this. A lot of those do wind up using this as a source, of course, as a primary source. So if you read the bibliography of, say, some kind of hero, you'll see this book listed in there a lot. Because it is, primarily in Cubby Broccoli's own words. I've always wanted to read this, and I've actually had a saved eBay search for this book for many years. This frequently pops up on eBay for $50 to $100 simply because somebody knows a Bond fan like myself is really going to want to read this. But again, I've just been wanting to read this ever since I heard it existed. There are a number of, or at least one or two different cover varieties, but again, this is the fancier UK hardcover edition. There are two glossy photo insert sections, and these are on nice glossy paper stock, so it's not like they just did some crummy photo printing. And some of these you will recognize from being used in other Bond works, but of course it's primarily going to be about Bond and the films, but it also is, of course, a biography as well. So I would say this would go hand in hand with the excellent Robert Sellers book, When Harry Met Cubby, which is sort of a history of the Bond films and also a biography of both Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman. So I'm very curious to see how the official autobiography of Cubby Broccoli compares with the Robert Sellers book that came out a couple years ago. But this has been a long time coming, trying to find one of these. If you're a Bond fan out there and you've personally tried to find one of these at an affordable price, you will very well know these do not pop up, and especially not the UK hardcover, which is fancier than the US edition. So I'm going to literally devour this and see what I get out of it compared to more modern reference books we've gotten. But this has just been one of the most difficult to obtain Bond reference books, simply because it was never reprinted. So I'm very happy to finally have a copy of this. It's not in perfect shape. It does have some cover creasing and some wear, but the seller on eBay who had put this up made me a very great deal on it, so I didn't feel too bad. Since it was not in perfect shape, but getting this for about $15 as opposed to $100 is a lot better. So I didn't mind the general wear and tear. So this was the one I saved for last, simply because I've tried to find this for years. I've been able to read excerpts of it. I've seen it on Google Books even, but I've never been able to read it because it's been so unobtainable. So that is the highlight of this video for additions to my James Bond book collection, both for reference works and the films, and of course the literary Bond as well. So that's it for this particular video. Again, I'm just always chipping away at new Bond book editions, again, whether it's for the films or reference works or the literary Bond or the continuation novels, or of course now even the comics, because I'm trying to focus on getting into the comics more and catching up on things that I've missed or just never gotten around to. So as always, I hope this has been informative and fun to watch, and to all Bond fans out there, always, 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 always keep bonding.